Moving on, Mariano and his mother, understandably put off by all of this, run out of the house with Abuela in hot pursuit. Mirabel says,
Please, there's gotta be an explanation.
I hate you!
"Thank you, Mirabel. I was just thinking the same thing." Isabella is understandably angry about not being engaged as she expected to be, and Pepa asks Mirabel,
What did you do?
which is hilarious to me because Mirabel was the only one actively trying to keep everything under wraps. It was, in fact, Dolores' psychotic screaming and her mother's own lack of chill that actually ruined the dinner party, but that's neither here nor there, I suppose. What does matter is that right at this moment, Mirabel conveniently sees a bunch of rats running off with pieces of Bruno's vision, forming a convenient trail for her to follow. We see Abuela at the front door, assuring a crowd of worried villagers that
the magic is strong. Everything is fine. We are the Madrigals. Mirabel!
she seems pretty angry, and I don't know that I blame her. What I don't understand is why she's mad at Mirabel. Her dinner party was ruined by Pepa and Dolores mostly, with little Antonio chipping in by failing to keep his animals under control. The only thing Mirabel did was try to cover up the cracks in the house, and she was the only one trying to stave off the distractions rather than actively cause them. I mean, I know that Abuela blames Mirabel for hurting the magic, but we all saw what happened. The dinner party didn't turn into a circus because the magic was failing. It happened precisely because, with the exception of Luisa, everyone else's gifts were in full operation, but they failed to control them adequately. All of this means that Abuela's character is making less and less sense. Every time that I think we might be honing in on her beliefs and motivations, she does something like this. So is she just blaming Mirabel for everything now? I mean, as recently as yesterday, she wasn't doing that. She was suspicious of her, sure, but there is no reason for Abuela to conclude that the circus that broke out during dinner was Mirabel's fault. This honestly feels like the movie just trying to force Abuela into the role of antagonist, but it couldn't think of a reason for her to be angry at Mirabel, so she just is. Anyway, Mirabel follows the rats up the stairs and she sees one of them squeeze itself behind a painting on the wall. She swings the painting aside to reveal a hidden passageway, and all I can say is it's certainly lucky that these rats decided to give away this little secret at exactly this moment rather than, well, any other time. So she follows one of the rats into the passageway, and it is picked up by a lone cloaked figure in the darkness. And in a flash of lightning, we see that the figure is none other than her Uncle Bruno. He runs away, and there's this neat little chase scene inside the walls of the house. Mirabel slips and is about to fall into a gaping chasm when Bruno returns and grabs her hand. Just like in Bruno's room, I don't know why Casita isn't helping her here. I don't know, maybe the house just goes dead in the presence of all things Bruno or something, but regardless, it turns out that the gaping chasm is actually about 4 feet deep, which I found mildly amusing. So, here he is, the man, the myth, the legendary Bruno, teller of fortunes and beholder of visions. Mirabel looks upon her uncle for the first time in years, this man who lies at the heart of her quest, the one who may hold the key to saving the miracle. He looks back at her, and after a long moment, he says,
"Bye."
What? No! Hold on!
and walks away. Flustered, Mirabel follows, peppering him with questions about the vision. Bruno, while acting out some rather strange and seemingly superstitious rituals, tells her that nobody was ever supposed to see that vision. Okay, pause. Am I the only one who thinks that there's no way this guy is 50 years old? I mean, I'm a pretty bad judge of age, but I'd say he looks, I don't know, late 30s or something. Okay, it's not a huge deal, all right? It seems a little odd to me, all right? He doesn't look old enough to be 50, but, I could be wrong. I could be wrong. Anyway, we learn that Bruno has been patching the cracks in the walls from the inside. I guess this is supposed to explain how all the cracks Mirabel saw during Antonio's party disappeared in a matter of seconds. I'm not particularly handy, so I don't really know how plaster works, but something tells me that this is not possible. Besides, I don't think that this would make the cracks completely disappear on the other side of the wall. Not to mention how he would have managed to patch the cracks in the floors and the ceiling. Like, the floor is a mosaic of colored tiles. How do you patch that up with plaster? Why does he even have plaster? The cracks only started showing up last night. Did he just happen to have some on hand, mixed up and ready to go for some reason? Now, I can already hear people saying that Bruno patching up the cracks in the home has some deep thematic symbolism, and you are free to read as much into it as you want. But in terms of simple logic, Bruno being able to do this doesn't make sense. It's a magic house, and the magic doesn't seem to have any persistent rules, so I can't outright call it impossible, but it is a plot gap until we get some kind of explanation as to how he could have done this. We also see that Bruno has multiple personalities that he plays at for his own amusement. Indeed, he seems to have lost his marbles a little bit, presumably from years of isolation. He's pretty quirky and charming, actually, nothing at all like the terrifying and ominous specter that Mirabelle was warned about. She then asks,
How long have you been back here?
"This is a very good question. In the beginning, Mirabelle said that, quote, they say Bruno saw the future, end quote, suggesting that she doesn't actually know this firsthand and that one day he disappeared, suggesting that she doesn't actually remember that day herself. This, combined with the information dumped on her in the song We Don't But Definitely Do Talk About Bruno, gave me the strong impression that she has actually never met her uncle, or at least that she has no memory of him. We've seen pictures of him from time to time, so it's possible that she would recognize him. And since we now know that Bruno has been living inside the walls of the house, it's reasonable that he would recognize her, even if he had disappeared before she was born. Still, she is acting rather nonchalant, considering this is quite possibly the first time she has ever met her own uncle, a man whom she has been told is essentially the boogeyman. And come to think of it, he's also acting rather strangely. Like, why was he content to just walk away from her here? What does he think that she's not going to tell anyone that she just found crazy Uncle Bruno lurking inside the walls? Like, why isn't he trying to hush her up or to make her swear not to tell anyone or something? Like, why is he acting like he can just ignore her and that everything will go back to the way it was before she found him? Why, if he wants to be hidden, why didn't he do anything to secure the secret entrance to his lair? I mean, it's just covered up with this painting that flaps around freely, and he knows that his own sister generates windstorms almost daily. How did no one ever find this hole before? Why doesn't Dolores hear them talking right now? But yeah, okay, we have no idea how long he's been in here, but we are told that he never left the house. So he's just been hiding here for what, 10, 15, 20 years? We don't know for sure, but I'm absolutely baffled as to how any of this is even remotely possible.
I don't understand why you left but didn't leave.
Yeah, I don't either. This logical confusion is quickly followed by an emotionally impactful moment that delivers some feels that are hopefully just powerful enough to make you forget about how what you just saw and heard doesn't make any sense. Mirabelle sees a crack in the wall that looks directly through to the family dining room, and Bruno has drawn a place setting for himself on his own dingy table. This is indeed emotionally impactful, at least it was for me. I can imagine this poor man, ostracized from his family, but unwilling to abandon them completely, peering through the cracks in the wall just to pretend like he is still there among them, enjoying their company and the special bond of eating together as he slowly descends into madness locked behind his self imposed prison for potentially 2 decades. It's undeniably moving, and it's the sort of thing that's so poignant that you really don't want to ask too many questions about it lest the moment be ruined, but I did warn you that I was going to ask questions about these things. I'm not going to ask how in the world nobody, including you know who, never heard this man eating, chewing, or clicking his silverware on the other side of these thin boards, presumably every night for several years. At this point, I think we are just forced to accept that the movie has no intention of being consistent with what any of the characters can or cannot hear. I'm also not going to ask why the entire wall is made out of plaster or something, except for this one opening that's been boarded over, since I can't imagine that anyone ever wanted a random window into the dining room that gave an excellent view of the gaps between the walls, which means the only reason this is here is for the emotion of the visual. I mean, did Casita build this little thing for him? Like, does the house know that he's living here? Can it feel him patching up the cracks? And if Casita can talk, why hasn't it told anyone where he is? Also, how did Bruno get a chair in here? Okay, the chair thing isn't a big deal, but for everything else, if the answer to these questions is just don't think about it, or hey, let's come up with our own headcanon theories to try and explain these things, if we do that, then we're just deciding that nothing needs to make sense in order to be satisfying. Just as long as it makes us feel things, then we're happy with it. That's absolutely fine, and you can watch movies however you want, but many people, myself included, have no idea what to be invested in because the stakes of this world are all over the place. I have no idea what is or is not possible within the universe of this story, and I have no idea what characters can or cannot do in response to what they learn and experience, and so I have no idea what the consequences of their choices will be. When anything can happen at any time for any reason or no reason at all, then what is there to even care about or get invested in? I can't hope that our heroes will overcome obstacles or make wise decisions because this movie has gone out of its way to be vague about what the obstacles are and how the world operates. Instead, we get this sort of tableau of sentimental moments that are admittedly quite powerful in isolation, but we are now nearly an hour into this film and I have no idea what is happening or why. And in terms of investment, the only thing I have is curiosity to see if anything is going to be explained and a vague hope that everything turns out okay because I superficially enjoy some of these characters. Now, it's not that scenes like this aren't entertaining, it's that they are only entertaining. And we as the audience are left to our own devices to try and imagine some kind of through line that's going to tie it all together into some sort of logical pattern. In other words, thus far, the story only makes sense if you start adding to the script in your head to try and fill in these gaps. I like this scene with Mirabel and Bruno. I just wish it was better written. Anyway, rant over. So Bruno says that his gift wasn't helping the family, but that he loves his family. This seems to be in response to Mirabel asking him earlier why he left without leaving. But this is a pretty wonky answer. If people didn't like Bruno telling them about the future, then why didn't he just stop doing that? Like, just stop telling people what's going to happen. You don't have to run away and hide. You don't even have to stop having visions. Just stop telling people about it if that's what's bothering them. I suppose, unless his gift is like Peppa's and he can't really control it, the visions just come and he just blurts out what he sees without any agency of his own. That might be an interesting development, so let's see what happens. Mirabel then asks the big question.
Why was I in your vision?
She says that she just wanted to make the family proud of her for once, but that she will stop what she's doing if it's hurting the magic or the family. This confirms what we suspected during Mirabel and Abuela's confrontation after Mirabel left Bruno's room. Namely, that Mirabel's motivations are primarily selfish and that she wants to redeem and prove herself in the eyes of others. But she seems to have had a moment of growth here where she admits that she is willing to give that up if what she's doing is making the problem worse. Remember that, it will come back later. Bruno replies that he does not know why she was in his vision. He explains that on the night of Mirabel's gift ceremony, Abuela became worried about the magic and asked Bruno to look into the future to find out what that meant. Oh, okay, so Bruno does actually have control over his gift, meaning that there is no reason why he couldn't have just stopped telling people about his visions rather than running away and hiding in the walls. Anyway, he had the vision as his mother requested. He saw that the magic would be in danger, he saw the house breaking apart, and he saw Mirabel. He says that this vision was unique and that he could not discern one single answer, no clear fate. And apparently, this was the only vision he had ever had in which the outcome was undecided. Why? Because it's about the protagonist, so shut up, okay? Fearing that the rest of the family would interpret this vision as everything's going to fall apart and it's all Mirabel's fault, much like Dolores seems to have settled on. Bruno decided not to reveal what he had seen in order to protect his niece. He was afraid that no one would believe him if he told the truth. That is, if he shared the vision and explained that, unlike his other visions, this one did not have a clear outcome. So he decided that his only choice was to disappear that very night. His reasoning is that,
But I knew how it was gonna look. I knew what everyone would think because I'm Bruno and everyone always assumes the worst.
no. People don't assume the worst about you, Bruno. They assume that you're right because you always are. We have been told that literally every single prediction this man has ever made has come true. That is why people believe his predictions, not because they are assuming the worst. Leaving that aside, I suppose it's possible that they wouldn't believe his claim that this vision was different from the others, but why wouldn't they? What does anyone else in the family know about seeing the future? Why would they doubt the man who was literally always right? I don't understand Bruno's reasoning here at all. Couldn't he just look into the future and find out for certain how people would react to this news about his previous vision? But even if we accept that Bruno hiding the truth of the vision was somehow the right move, I still have so many questions. Why doesn't he just lie and say that he couldn't see anything or that he couldn't have the vision? Why doesn't he just describe the parts of the vision that don't include Mirabel? Like, does he have to actually physically show the little glass pane to his mother? No one else has ever even mentioned seeing one of these things, so is one of these little glass planes created every time he has a vision? Does everyone know about this? Would they demand to see it if he mentioned the vision at all? I have no idea. Why does he think that he personally needs to disappear? What does he think, like, Abuela was going to ask him about the vision and he couldn't just be like, nope, sorry, I didn't see anything, or, well, I saw the house falling apart, but I didn't get enough information to say why. And if he doesn't want anyone to see the vision, then why does he just drop it in his room and vanish? He didn't even take the pieces with him. Why? Did he just assume that after he disappeared, nobody in the family was going to look for him or the vision in his own bedroom? I mean, in fairness to him, I guess nobody has looked for him or the vision in his bedroom, but that makes even less sense. To disappear entirely after Abuela asks you specifically to have a vision about the failing magic is only going to convince her and everyone else that you actually did see something important, and disappearing on the very same day that Mirabel didn't receive a gift is only going to cast more suspicion on her. Like, did he really think that his mother was just going to shrug and say, well, I guess my son is just gone, and I'm not going to get any answers about what to do for the miracle? I mean, Abuela already blames Mirabel for everything, so his plan didn't work very well, did it? Which he should already know, since he's been watching everybody through the walls for what, at least 10 years now? And on top of that, somehow, somebody found out that he had a terrible vision about the magic because Louisa overheard the adults talking about it. How was that even possible? How could anyone know that he even had a vision about the failing magic? He says that he never told anyone about it, and against all probability, apparently nobody found the pieces of it until Mirabel came along. Now, I suppose Abuela might have told somebody that she asked him to look into the future about the failing of the magic, but nobody knows if he did. And why does everybody refuse to talk about Bruno? Why has this whole situation been played as if his own mother isn't even sorry that he's gone? Abuela should be scouring the entire earth looking for him, not only because he's her son, but because we know that she is desperate for any information she can get about what's wrong with the magic. Even if we accept that she is cynical and only cares about the magic and doesn't care about her missing son at all, she should still have torn her home and the entire valley apart looking for him and his vision that she asked him to have. But instead, the movie wants us to believe that he's just some kind of nonconformist and that Abuela is secretly happy to be rid of him so that he'd stop being so bothersome with his pesky visions. This makes no sense whatsoever. And it's not even the end of it. Why did Mirabel say in the beginning that Bruno disappeared one day? We now know that he vanished the very same day that her gift failed. This is the single most important day of her life and the central pillar of both her character and her struggle. We know for a fact that she remembers that event, but this day should also be burned in her memory as the last day that she ever saw her Uncle Bruno. Why has nobody ever mentioned this before? Why doesn't Mirabel remember when this happened? Nobody has thought it was at all noteworthy that these two colossally bad events occurred on the very same day. Nobody thought that there might be a connection between Mirabel's lack of gift and Bruno's disappearance. How has this never occurred to Mirabel herself, let alone any of the other grown-ups in the family, especially Abuela? What in the world is happening? And it doesn't even stop there. We know that nobody, including Bruno, has any idea why the magic is failing, so why is he so sure that Mirabel isn't the reason for it? When he saw the vision that might have suggested that Mirabel would be responsible for the failing magic, why does he immediately conclude that that can't be right? Why is he immediately afraid that everybody will suspect that Mirabel will cause the magic to fail when, as far as he knows, that's exactly right? She might indeed cause the magic to fail. Mirabel herself is willing to admit that possibility here, so why isn't he? He knows that the magic is or soon will be in danger, so why would he deliberately hide the one clue that they have, as vague as it is? Is Bruno really willing to stand by and watch the entire miracle wither and die rather than risk the possibility that people might suspect his niece? What exactly is he afraid that the family's gonna do to her? Like, be mean to her? Treat her like a leper? They already do that, which he is well aware of, and his decision to vanish on the day of her gift ceremony rather than stick around and actually help address the problem has only made things harder for her. Mirabel says that Bruno left to protect her, which is utterly laughable because the movie wants us to see him as this noble martyr living in isolation and exile for the sake of a beloved family member, but disappearing and hiding in the walls was quite possibly the worst decision he could have made under the circumstances. Bruno, my man, you've been in this movie for less than 5 minutes, and you've already broken not only your own character, but nearly every other character adjacent to you. I have no doubt that Bruno's introduction here was meant to answer questions and provide new context for the plot, but instead it's broken the plot entirely. I'm sorry, but it's true. I want to like this character. He's charming and he's quirky, and some of his moments do indeed make me feel some feels, and John Leguizamo's voice acting is solid, but nothing about Bruno as a character makes any sense whatsoever. The entire conflict of this film thus far hinges on his decision to have a vision and then hide in the walls for a decade, and this decision can only be explained by Bruno being an idiot who is incapable of basic cognition, and I do not think that this is what the writers intended. Moving on. Bruno says that he thinks the fate of the family, the miracle, and everything will all come down to Mirabel, but that he doesn't exactly know what that means. He then tries to send her on her way, saying that that's all he knows and he's sorry that he can't see any more of her future. Mirabel then has a great idea.
You wish you could have seen more, so see more. Have another vision.
Yeah. Why in the world didn't you see more, Bruno? I mean, we know that you can see the future at will, so why didn't you keep looking for answers or information? Why have you just been sitting here instead of, doing anything at all to help? You know better than anyone else what's happening to the Encanto, so why haven't you done anything at all to prevent it? Is it because it will make our heroine look extra super duper heroic if she's the only one in the story with any agency at all? I mean, literally everyone else in this story has a static future that Bruno can predict with absolute certainty, but Mirabel is unique and gets to make choices. Right. Bruno insists that he can't and that he doesn't do visions anymore, and I have absolutely no idea why. Doing so might have enabled him to understand and help avert a crisis that threatens the foundation of the family that he claims to love, and actually that might even have worked as a reason for his disappearance. They could have written it so that Bruno wanted to continue having his visions away from prying eyes and distractions. Maybe the uncertainty associated with this particular vision would require extra levels of concentration and meditation or something that he couldn't have when he was surrounded by his family, so he had to go into isolation to actually be useful. But that unfortunately, is not what is in the movie, so I will go no further down that rabbit hole. Bruno then says that he couldn't have a vision even if he wanted to because he needs a, quote, big open space, end quote, and that Mirabel trashed his bedroom. How does he know that Mirabel trashed his bedroom? No idea. More importantly, if you need space, go outside, you walnut. None of this would be a problem if you hadn't chosen to spend the last 10 years cloistered away in this glorified broom closet. Oh, and by the way, Antonio is just here now, and he offers up his room for Bruno to use. Apparently, he says that the rats told him everything. This is consistent with his gift to communicate with animals, but the timing is certainly convenient. And wait, hold up. Does this mean that the rats can understand Mirabel and Bruno too? I thought that the animals could only understand Antonio. Like, isn't that his gift? I mean, maybe the rats or all of the animals can understand all of the people, but only Antonio can understand the rats. Wow, that must make Mirabel feel really bad if even the rats get magical powers before she does. But in the same vein, why have the rats waited so long to be like, hey, Antonio, you know your missing uncle? No, I know you don't remember him, but yeah, he's been hanging out with us inside the walls for like 10 years. Like, Antonio got his gift almost 24 hours ago, and this is the first time that they've said anything to him? Like, if the rats had told Antonio where Bruno is hiding, that would have been a much more reasonable way for Bruno to be found, instead of Mirabel just randomly following some rats who decided to run down a hole. And it would have allowed somebody besides Mirabel to actually be relevant to this plot, which was perhaps why the writers did not go that route. I have no idea whether this was intentional on the writer's part, but as it stands, Mirabel is basically the only character thus far who has any agency. Everybody else either doesn't make decisions or they make decisions that ultimately mean nothing in terms of the advancement of the plot. Mirabel is, I think, supposed to be a teenager, and I know that a lot of teenagers think that they are the only ones in the world with any agency, but this is generally not a perspective that we should reinforce. I do have to say, however, that I like this moment where Antonio tells his jaguar not to eat a pair of rats, and it just looks at him like a scolded puppy. It's not important, but it did make me smile. What I don't like is that Bruno and Antonio have absolutely no reaction upon seeing each other. There is no way that Antonio is 10 years old, meaning that he is meeting his uncle for the first time, and he could not care less. I mean, look at him. Bruno, for his part, has presumably seen his nephew through the walls for the boy's entire life, but this is his first time speaking with him, and neither of them acknowledge this. There isn't anything. There's no embrace, there's no awkward silence, there's no uncertainty, there's nothing. There's no hey a sport or wow, are you really Tio Bruno? There's nothing. And Antonio's not a character anymore. He's just here to move the plot along, which is too bad because he was actually one of the best characters up to this point. And so, Mirabel tells Bruno that the family needs his help and he needs to get out of his hidey hole. And so he does. Like, that's it? That's all that it took to convince him to give up this decade-long hermitage? I mean, he already knew that the family needed his help. His mother begged him to help, and he abandoned her without so much as a goodbye. The only difference here is that, well, it's Mirabel who's asking him. I mean, I guess he's convinced that she's the key to fixing everything, so maybe that's why he listens to her. I don't know. Okay, so to sum up, in terms of what happens, Mirabel follows some rats down a hole and finds Bruno hiding in the walls of the house. Bruno explains why he disappeared, even though that makes absolutely no sense, and then tells Mirabel that she is the one who will decide the fate of the Encanto one way or another. Mirabel then convinces Bruno to come out of hiding and to have another vision so they can figure out how to save the Encanto. The biggest questions here are why is this particular vision about Mirabel and the Encanto the only vision that Bruno has ever had that allows the subject any agency? There is no explanation for this other than, well, she's the protagonist in a movie, you see. Secondly, why did nobody ever look for Bruno or this particular vision in his room? In fact, it doesn't seem like anybody looked for him at all. Nobody seems to care at all that he's missing, and everybody just assumes that he disappeared voluntarily when, as far as anyone knows, he could be dead. But yeah, the entire family just kind of threw up their hands and accepted his absence, and nobody ever even tried to look for him. And we know that nobody tried to look for him because if they had looked for him, they would certainly have looked in his room, and had they looked in his room, they would have found this vision 10 years ago. Thirdly, how did nobody, especially Dolores, hear Bruno living in the walls? We're going to come back to this later, but for now, I just don't think this is possible. And, of course, why didn't Casita tell anyone that Bruno was hiding inside the walls, like some kind of skin mite? So that's the plot. Now, in terms of characters, it's not much better. We learn that Mirabel wants to save the Encanto in order to make people proud of her, confirming that she is, in fact, more selfishly motivated than she had let on earlier, but that she is willing to stop trying to save the Encanto if she ends up making the problem worse. This could actually set up the really interesting question of what Mirabel might actually choose were she in a situation where she could either save the Encanto or make people proud of her, but not both. We will have to see what the film does with this. Then we come to Bruno, who is quirky, superstitious, and shy, cares enough about the family to pretend to eat with them, but does not care enough about the family to actually eat with them, nor to do anything to save the Encanto. We learn that he wants to protect Mirabel from suspicion, but that he is a colossal idiot whose decisions make absolutely no sense. This isn't inherently a problem, but unfortunately, the film never acknowledges that his decisions make absolutely no sense, which is inherently a problem. Antonio is apparently completely unfazed by seeing his missing uncle for the first time in his life, and we learn that Abuela explicitly asked Bruno to have this vision after Mirabel's gift ceremony failed. As far as questions, in addition to knowing what they would like to do with this setup regarding Mirabel's motivations and what she will do when faced with a difficult moral choice, there are about 100 things that I would like to ask about Bruno, but I can simply sum them all up as saying, why does nothing about Bruno make any sense? As far as miscellaneous comments on this scene, it relies heavily on convenience, in that Mirabel simply happens to see some rats fleeing down a hole. We have no idea why they did this, and it simply is lucky that she happened to notice this happening. Otherwise, the story simply ends. Mirabel has no other leads, and since the rats apparently hadn't communicated to Antonio that Bruno was hiding in the walls until Mirabel found him, we have no reason to assume that the rats would ever tell Antonio that Bruno was hiding in the walls before Mirabel found him for some reason. Beyond that, Mirabel seems to be the only character in this story with any agency. Bruno explicitly tells her that everything is going to hinge on her, and beyond that, we don't see any character making any real decision that has any significance to the development of the plot whatsoever. The only real decision of any consequence was Bruno's decision to hide in the walls, but the only consequence of Bruno being a wall hobo was that nobody found the vision until Mirabel came along, meaning that Bruno's only significance to the story is to make room for Mirabel to have all of the significant choices in the story. And as I mentioned, I don't understand how it's even possible that Bruno could be the one patching up the cracks in the house. Nor do I understand what the significance of that would even be. Moving on, we cut to Abuela, who is chewing out Augustine for not telling her about the vision sooner, and he responds that he was thinking about his daughter. And I need to pause here. So, first of all, I was under the impression that Augustine intended to tell everyone about the vision after the business with Mariano's family was concluded, so as to not cause the very catastrophe that Abuela is now complaining about. Remember that he told Mirabel that they would play it cool, quote, until the Guzmans leave, end quote. Abuela has also inexplicably been refusing to discuss the state of the magic with anyone, so Augustine was absolutely right to assume that she would not be in the mood to talk about Bruno's vision during Isabella's proposal dinner. I can accept that Abuela here is just upset and is looking for someone to blame, while also being something of a hypocrite rather than thinking and speaking sensibly. After all, this is what people tend to do when they're upset. What is harder to accept is Augustine's bizarre response. After all, he didn't choose to delay telling Abuela about the vision because he was thinking about his daughter. He did it because he was thinking about not ruining dinner and causing a scene. He could have simply said, I was going to tell you after dinner. This would not only be more true to what he actually said his motivation was, but it might have helped to avoid antagonizing his mother-in-law. The only way Augustine's line does make sense is if the daughter he's referring to as Isabella, as in he didn't want to ruin Isabella's proposal dinner, but it definitely sounds like he's talking about Mirabel, since Abuela seems to be blaming Mirabel for what happened. Abuela then yells at Peppa to calm down since she's causing a rainstorm, and predictably, this is not helpful. Julieta then says that her mother has always been too hard on Mirabel. This is an interesting accusation, so let's take a look at it. Mirabel was the first person in the family who failed to receive a gift, and no one knows why. Abuela asked Bruno to look into the matter, and that was the last time she saw him, going on 10 years now. Abuela asked Mirabel not to help with the preparations for Antonio's ceremony, just in case her involvement might cause his gift to fail as well. This does seem pretty cruel on the face of it, but again, nobody has any idea how the magic works, so as far as anyone knows, this would be a perfectly reasonable precaution, and after all, Abuela was pretty kind and diplomatic about the whole thing, all things considered. And once it became clear that Antonio could not complete his gift ceremony without Mirabel's help, then Abuela allowed her to help him without any objection. The next time we see Abuela and Mirabel interact, Mirabel is being disruptive at breakfast for seemingly no reason. The next time is when Luisa tells her grandmother that her gift started failing right after speaking with and taking advice from Mirabel. Then we have the catastrophe at dinner and the revelation that Bruno predicted that Mirabel would somehow be involved with the failing magic. So, based on what we have seen, Abuela has every reason to want to minimize Mirabel's involvement with the family's magic, because from her perspective, everything Mirabel has touched has only gotten worse. Abuela's only expectation of Mirabel is that she limit her participation in certain family functions that directly involve the miracle. Now, this is certainly hard on Mirabel, but is it too hard? Given what the characters know about how the magic works, which is basically nothing, I would argue that this is a perfectly reasonable expectation. Julieta, of course, may not see it that way, but she is simply wrong here. That's not really a problem with Julieta's character, as she has been shown to be predominantly interested in protecting her children, perhaps even when it's inappropriate. Abuela then says, "Look around. We must protect our family, our Encanto. We cannot lose our home." This has been Abuela's consistent mantra, sure, but it's not really a response to what Julieta just said. She should be explaining why she is so hard on Mirabel, why she considers her to be a danger to the magic. I mean, she has reasons, so why doesn't she just lay them out? This would go a long way toward adding some nuance and, frankly, some logic to this family's conflict. We might actually have some understandable motivations, and we might see characters learning from each other's points of view, instead of what we have in this scene, which is a frantic and confused old biddy reeing about how things aren't perfect, but at the same time how everything is just fine and there's nothing to worry about. Then some guy from the village pokes his head in to tell Abuela that the villagers are concerned about the magic and they want to see her. She leaves with him, presumably to gaslight everybody once again about how everything is just fine, while saying over her shoulder,
Mirabel was in that vision for a reason. Find her.
She tosses on this black shawl, there's this peal of thunder, and she delivers the line with this ominous tone that makes the whole thing seem like she's some kind of evil empress who's ordering a hit. I mean, it's obviously supposed to be upping the tension and the stakes, like, oh no, now the family is going to be looking for Mirabel to try and stop her from saving everything, but if they find her, then what? Like, what are we supposed to be afraid is going to happen if Abuela finds Mirabel? What exactly is she going to stop her from doing? Like, is she going to throw her in a dungeon that we don't know about? Is she going to have her killed? That seems unlikely. What is she going to do? She's going to yell at her, chew her out, and tell her to stop causing problems? I mean, that would probably be unpleasant, but is that it? Like, the only thing Mirabel's doing right now is talking with people. What is Abuela going to do? Forbid everyone in the family from talking with Mirabel? Is she going to kick her out of the house? How would she even enforce that? Why would anyone even go along with that? Abuela doesn't have any magic of her own, and Mirabel's parents, at least, are willing to stand up to her nonsense. So, what exactly is at stake here if the family finds Mirabel? Predictably, I have absolutely no idea. I also don't understand why she's going outside to talk to the villagers. Like, is keeping up appearances with the village more important to her than actually fixing the problem with the magic? Why would that be the case? Is she actually more proud and vain than we've been led to believe? Like, is she actually so enamored with her position as the matriarch of the magical family that she's going to prioritize placating the crowd over actually doing something to save the magic? Abuela's motivations and personality are all over the place. She says that what she wants most of all is to preserve the Encanto, but what she does shows that what she wants most of all is to preserve the appearance of the Encanto. Now, this might be fine, except for the fact that we have absolutely no idea why she would be that way. Once again, maybe this is going to be answered, but as it stands, it's a huge question mark. In terms of plot, really the only thing that happens is that Abuela tells the family to find Mirabel, and then she goes to the townsfolk, presumably to reassure them that nothing is wrong. The biggest questions I have are related to the stakes. Firstly, what exactly will happen if the family finds Mirabel? And secondly, I could have asked this at any point thus far in the movie, but what exactly will happen if the Encanto dies? I think we can assume that the family would lose their magical powers, but is that all? What else? It's not made clear at all. As far as characters, we learn that Abuela is willing now to admit to her family that the Encanto is in danger, since she can't exactly hide the fact that the house is cracking to pieces, but she is still not willing to admit this to any of the townspeople. She prioritizes keeping up appearances over solving problems, and she apparently does not understand why telling Pepa to calm down would be unhelpful. Julieta believes that her mother is too hard on Mirabel. This was hinted at earlier, but now she's just said so outright. We learn that Agustin is willing to stand up to his mother-in-law, but that he does not communicate effectively when defending his choices. And we learn that Peppa really hates being told to calm down. The biggest questions here are, why does Abuela prioritize maintaining appearances over solving problems? Why is no one, including Abuela, actually doing anything to try to save the Encanto if they all agree that it's in danger? And why is Abuela the only one willing to acknowledge the very real possibility that Mirabel might actually somehow be connected to the failing of the Encanto? Everybody else seems to assume that this is impossible, but why? Additionally, we still have no idea what these cracks mean or why they happen. Moving on, we see Bruno, Mirabel, and Antonio in Antonio's room. Recall that Antonio offered his room to Bruno because Bruno needs a large open space in order to have his vision. Bruno is making preparations to have another vision, and he's worrying about how if he sees something that Mirabel doesn't like, she's gonna, quote, be all like, Bruno makes bad things happen, oh he's creepy, and his vision killed my goldfish, end quote. First of all, Bruno's like 50 years old. Did he really hide in the walls for 10 years to protect his niece, or was it to protect himself from not being liked? Like, seriously, was Bruno's exile some kind of noble sacrifice to protect someone he loves, or was it just the juvenile panicky tantrum of an insecure man-child? I feel like the movie kind of has to pick one. By the way, we've never heard anyone actually accuse Bruno of making bad things happen, and sure, people have said he was creepy, but is that supposed to be the reason he hid in the walls for a decade? By the way, Bruno, if somebody can't tell the difference between prediction and causation, then their opinion of you probably isn't worth worrying about. Regardless, Mirabel's response to this is, I don't think you make bad things happen. Sometimes family weirdos just get a bad rap. Thank you, writers, for making your protagonist simply blurt out the moral that you would like the audience to absorb. We might have missed it otherwise. Antonio gives him a little stuffed animal to hold on to, and Bruno takes a deep breath and repeats, I can do this. This was a bit confusing to me because, yeah, of course he can do this. Having visions is what Bruno does. Sure, he says that he's been out of practice for like 10 years, but how would he forget how to do it? I thought the issue was that he didn't want to have another vision for some reason, not that he couldn't do it. I'm not understanding his lack of confidence here. His visions have literally never been wrong, so why does he need this encouragement? Recall, if you will, that this man is supposed to be 50 years old, and yet he's being coddled and consoled by children in order to do the thing that he has done literally perfectly since he was a child himself. But I suppose it is a tender moment, so we're just not supposed to think about it. Anyway, Bruno does his little ritual and the vision begins. There's dramatic music and these swirling wreaths of glowing sand. We see the same image as in his previous vision, that is, Mirabel standing in front of a crumbling house. Bruno says, "It's just the same thing. I gotta stop." And I'm confused again because, of course, he's seeing the same thing. He's trying to foretell the same event. I don't understand what his problem is here. Why does seeing the same thing convince him that he needs to stop the vision? Does seeing the same event twice put him in some kind of pain? Why is he giving up so quickly? I suspect that it's so that the plucky heroine can say, "No, keep going." Because, you see, Mirabel is the only one who can have any courage or agency in this movie. So she says, "No, keep going," and the vision continues. They see a butterfly perched on a reed, and then they see the magic candle, and the ghostly image of Mirabel holds another figure in an embrace. Bruno exclaims, "To make the candle bright, you have to embrace her." The her turns out to be
Isabella!
Seeing her disgust, Bruno says,
Every time.
which to me was actually kind of funny. More importantly, it now seems that they have a new lead to saving the miracle. Mirabel evidently needs to give her sister Isabella a hug. But hold on. We went from Bruno's visions initially being infallible predictions of an inevitable future to a vague suggestion that our heroine's agency would decide the fate of everything to now being interpreted as guidance? Like, if we were to interpret this vision the way Bruno always has, this would simply tell us that Mirabel will give Isabella a hug, not that she should. Although I suppose this does make pretty clear that this is a self fulfilling prophecy. They have chosen to interpret Bruno's vision as what they should do, so Mirabel is going to go out of her way to make sure that this hug happens. We were told at first that Bruno's visions were simply plain statements of fact, but now the characters are interpreting them as instructions on what people should do in order to accomplish their goals. How? Why? This is a huge change in how Bruno's visions work, and once again, the only explanation for it is that Mirabel is the key to everything, so of course it works this way for her. Because, after all, if this vision wasn't guidance, then once again, she would have absolutely no leads in terms of what she should do. And beyond that, was this really the only thing that Bruno had to do in order to get more information on how to save the miracle? He just had to keep going? Like, if 10 years ago he hadn't chickened out on the rest of the vision the first time, could he have just told Mirabel 10 years ago, "Hey, go give your sister a hug and everything will be fine"? Like, did it only work this time because Mirabel was there to spot a shiny butterfly and say, "Hey, let's take a couple steps this way so we can see the rest of the vision"? I don't I don't understand. Why is this movie allergic to being consistent or making any sense? Also, where is Antonio? Is he just disappeared off screen? He's not gonna like say anything? They're in his room. He was here like 30 seconds ago. What happened? I mean, okay, I guess, Antonio's not needed to push the plot forward right now, so he just doesn't exist for the moment. Regardless, Bruno and Mirabel are now in the hallway above the courtyard. Mirabel asks why hugging Isabella would save the miracle. Bruno says that he doesn't know. To save a family miracle, you hug a sister, which I guess makes about as much sense as everything else so far. We then see Camilo on the ground floor calling for Mirabel when his head suddenly shrinks into a baby head, and Bruno says, "We don't have much time," since I guess Camilo's head shrinking is supposed to be a sign that the magic is getting worse. I mean, yeah, I guess you could say that, but why, I ask you, does a failing Encanto cause Luisa to lose her super strength completely, while Camilo doesn't lose his ability to shapeshift? It just makes him shapeshift into random things at random times against his will, while everyone else's gifts, particularly Bruno's, seem to function just fine. Like, seriously, if the dying Encanto had made Bruno lose his ability to tell the future, then everybody would just be out of luck right now. I really don't think that we're ever going to get an answer for why everybody's gifts behave differently, and I am somewhat of two minds about this. I can't really call this a plot hole since the magic kind of just does things, so there aren't really any rules for it to follow, and thus there aren't really any rules for it to break. I'm not really sure I can call it a plot gap either, since you'll recall I defined a plot gap as an unexplained event that is crucial for the advancement of the plot. Louisa losing her strength mostly serves to motivate Mirabel and add a sense of urgency to her mission, but is this really crucial to the story? Well, Mirabel embarked on her little quest before talking with Louisa, so she was already motivated. When Luisa started crying about things suddenly feeling heavy, that does give Abuela additional reason to suspect that Mirabel is adversely affecting the magic, but she already had reasons to suspect this. Luisa wailing about being unable to move the piano at dinner doesn't do anything other than add to the chaos of that scene. In short, I think we can say that Luisa gradually losing her power completely doesn't actually have an essential narrative function, and it serves purely to add tension and drama to her scenes. At least, that has been the case so far. Similarly, Camilo's shapeshifting mishap does nothing other than give Bruno a reason to tell our heroine that the clock is ticking, which is something that they both already know, and maybe to be funny. On the other hand, Peppa not losing her power is a convenient way to have storms in the background during tense and dramatic scenes, and Julieta's power isn't really relevant to the plot at any point in the film, so we're not going to waste any more time on it. In other words, the failing of the magic having completely different effects on family members for seemingly no reason is not crucial to the plot, and therefore I'm not going to call it a plot gap. But it is being used to generate drama and tension without any supporting explanation, so I think it is best labeled as a contrivance. Your mileage may vary, of course, but I personally found this inconsistency in the magic very distracting because I had no idea what would happen should Mirabel fail. Would they all die? Would they just become normal people? Would their powers get scrambled and becoming uncontrollable curses, kind of like Peppa's already is? I kept trying to figure out what was at stake, and I was confused why all of the characters were acting and talking as if they did understand the stakes when clearly none of them do. So the contrivance is certainly there, but like I said, your reaction to the contrivance is subjective. Moving on, Mirabel says that it won't work because Isabella will never hug her. Isabella hates her, and Mirabel just ruined her proposal, and she's a pretty crummy person anyway, and it's really nice to hear someone accurately describing Isabella's character. Instead of,
Our angel! Our angel!
Perfect, like Señorita Perfecta Isabela.
Bruno snaps at Mirabel, telling her that she's missing the point. The fate of the family doesn't depend on Isabella, but on Mirabel, and that she is exactly what the family needs if she would only see it. So, yeah, this is actually really nice. Bruno is essentially slapping her across the face, telling her to get over herself and go do what everybody needs her to do. This is the first time in this movie that someone has actually confronted Mirabel about one of her faults, and it's really nice to see. Although I do have to wonder if it was really necessary to remind everybody once again that Mirabel is the only character whose decisions actually matter. And then, for some reason, Bruno says that he's not going to help Mirabel anymore because he's afraid Abuela will see him. Okay, good sir. What exactly will happen if your grandmother sees you that will be worse than Mirabel failing in her quest to save the Encanto? You know what? Shelve that. Why can't Dolores hear them having this conversation? She heard Luisa's eye twitching. There is no reason why Dolores should not be able to hear everyone's heartbeat at all times, let alone an audible conversation. The whole family is looking for Mirabel. Dolores should, at this precise moment, be pointing everyone towards Mirabel like a bloodhound. You know what?
Clear skies. Clear skies.
Okay. But yeah, Bruno, my man, like, I know you interpreted the vision to mean that everything is gonna depend on Mirabel, but you're gonna, what? You're just gonna hide in your hole and do nothing? If both of you are so afraid of Abuela finding out what's going on, then you're not gonna, like, act as a lookout? You're not gonna be a distraction? You don't think that you could grab everyone's attention away from Mirabel just by showing up after 10 years? All you have to do is walk downstairs and say hello, and everybody will instantly forget about their search for Mirabel. You could even go with her and corroborate Mirabel's story and be like, hey, Isabella, yeah, long time no see. Anyway, listen, I had a vision that showed me that the magic will fail if you and Mirabel don't hug it out, like, right now. Yeah, I don't really understand it either, but my visions have literally never been wrong, so just shut up and do it or we're all screwed. He's not even gonna do that. Nope, he's just gonna hide. Okay, alright. So, in this scene, Bruno has another vision, which he interprets to mean that in order to save the Encanto, Mirabel needs to hug Isabella. Bruno then retreats back into his hidey hole for fear of his mother. And my biggest question as far as the plot goes is why are Bruno's visions now functioning as guidance when they have never done that before? As far as characters, we learn that Mirabel really dislikes Isabella, which we kind of already knew, but now she has said so explicitly. We learn that Mirabel is definitely the key to everything, and the only person whose decisions actually matter, and that she does not give up easily. Bruno thinks that nobody likes him and is willing to hide in the walls for a decade in order to escape being disliked. He is prone to giving up easily, and he is terrified of his mother. The biggest questions here are why is Bruno so terrified of his mother, and why is Bruno such a colossal man child that even at the age of 50 he is willing to hide in the walls, presumably forever, so as to not have to be in the presence of anybody who might have a low opinion of him. Other notes, as I mentioned, the behavior of the family's gifts due to the failing Encanto is contrived so as to maximize drama, rather than because of any comprehensible rules of how the magic actually works. And, of course, the family weirdos get a bad rap line is extremely clunky and on the nose. Something that may not bother some viewers, but to me, this was tacky and extremely off putting.